Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, President Trump announcing a new investment in the U.S. That's as he teases more tariffs in the coming days. Which sectors is he targeting? And what's the latest with reciprocal tariffs? Iris Tao at the White House. Multiple Trump administration officials are set to travel abroad this week to strengthen partnerships in the fight against illegal immigration. This includes a visit by the DHS secretary to a prison in El Salvador holding alleged gang members. Arian Pazdar has the immigration update. An appeals court judge spars with a Justice Department attorney over his efforts to reinstate the president's order to remove suspected members of a Venezuelan gang. Arlene Richards has the key takeaways from that hearing. In Israel, a terrorist drives his car into a bus stop, then begins stabbing and shooting at people. Meanwhile, in the Gaza Strip, Israel launches an airstrike on a hospital. Jason Perry reports. The U.S. and Russia begin talks in Saudi Arabia aimed at a partial ceasefire in the Russia-Ukraine war. The State Department says a full ceasefire has never been closer. Jason Blair has the details.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. President Trump threatened 25% tariffs today against any country that buys oil or gas from Venezuela. He posted on Truth Social that the secondary tariff would apply to all trade with the U.S. Earlier this month, Trump issued a 30-day wind down of a license the U.S. granted to Chevron to operate in Venezuela and export its oil. The president has accused Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro of not making progress on electoral reforms and accepting deportees. The president wrote in a Truth Social post that Venezuela has been, quote, very hostile to the United States and the freedoms which we espouse. Trump said the tariffs will take effect April 2nd. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem is set to visit a maximum security prison in El Salvador. The facility holds alleged Venezuelan gang members deported from the U.S. Venezuela is now starting to take its citizens back, so the U.S. won't need to send them to El Salvador. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pazdar is in South America with the immigration update.
A deportation flight carrying almost 200 Venezuelans landed in the Latin American country early Monday. The flights are resuming after the U.S. reached an agreement with Venezuela over the weekend. The country usually doesn't take back its citizens who are being deported from the U.S. President Trump is making good on his campaign promise to deport illegal immigrants. He says many of the deported Venezuelans are members of the violent gang UNRWA, something a Venezuelan official denied on Monday.
We are not going to condemn Venezuelans just because that is the narrative the U.S. wants to impose.
Now, before Venezuela started accepting the deported immigrants, the U.S. sent many of them to El Salvador. That's because the country offered housing the alleged gang members at a maximum security prison. And Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem is set to visit the prison here in Latin America this week. Noem says she'll visit the prison on Wednesday, and she's scheduled to meet with El Salvador's President Nayib Bukele later that day. Noem also addressed the situation at the southern border on Monday, saying there are almost no illegal entries, while deportations of illegal immigrants are going up.
In the month of March, the last couple of weeks increased our deportations by 50%. So we're now not even just getting the worst of the worst out. We're making sure that there's consequences for being here and committing crimes in our communities.
President Trump says some of the deported immigrants are violent criminals who shouldn't stay in the U.S.
These are stone-cold killers. They don't care. They don't even think about it. They kill somebody. They go to sleep. They wake up. They don't even remember they killed them.
Noem is also scheduled to visit Colombia and Mexico after her stop in El Salvador. She laid out what she hopes to achieve during her meetings with the heads of state of those countries.
Talking about building these relationships so that we can continue to get people out of this country that don't belong here and take them home.
And Secretary of State Marco Rubio, meanwhile, is scheduled to travel to the Caribbean. The secretary also plans to address illegal immigration, drug trafficking, and more. Arian Pazdar, NTD News.
The Justice Department today defends its position to deport Venezuelan immigrants believed to be members of terrorist gang UNRWA. The government attorney pushed back on repeated questions from the Obama-appointed judge. NTD's Arlene Richards has more details.
An Obama-appointed appeals court judge peppered a Justice Department attorney in a hearing on Monday to address the Trump administration's efforts to deport Venezuelan nationals under the Alien Enemies Act. Judge Patricia Millett challenged the attorney's arguments that a lower court judge didn't have authority to issue a restraining order against the president, peppering him with questions for an hour, 30 minutes longer than the allotted time. She distinguished the president's authority to make decisions under the act against the right of the immigrants involved to have a hearing. The president's proclamation that invoked the act indicated that Venezuelan immigrants who were members of terrorist gang Tren de Aragua must be removed. Millett said the individuals who were removed didn't get a chance to say whether or not they were members of the gang. Border czar Tom Homan told ABC on Sunday that he's confident they're all members of Tren de Aragua.
So a lot of officers, a lot of criminal investigators, special agents who've done this for decades, looked at the intelligence information, the criminal investigation information, all the various social media and surveillance and government records and public records, and they are confident that they're all members of the TDA. And I'm not surprised that a member of the family said they're not a member of the TDA.
The government argued that the lower court's order focused on the president's power to make decisions that impact national security and that the president isn't required to give notice before removing individuals under the act. Trump-appointed Judge Justin Walker challenged the plaintiff's decision to bring its case in a D.C. district court rather than a court in Texas that typically hears these kinds of cases. Meanwhile, on Monday morning, the lower court judge James Boasberg, whom the Justice Department argues shouldn't preside over this case, published a 37-page order denying the department's request that the restraining order be dismissed. He said the Venezuelans marked for deportation under the Alien Enemies Act are likely to win because they are entitled to individual hearings. The appeals court is expected to rule as soon as possible. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
Unveiling a new investment, President Trump doubles down on his tariff policy while teasing more actions in the coming days. He also convened his second cabinet meeting today with Elon Musk in attendance. NTD's Iris Tao has more from the White House.
Cars are coming into this country at levels never seen before.
Announcing a new $20 billion new investment from South Korean car maker Hyundai, President Trump says it shows that his tariffs are working and attracting investments and creating jobs.
The tariffs are bringing them in at levels that have not been witnessed.
The president says the administration has identified around $4 trillion worth of companies moving back to the U.S., while he announces that more tariffs are coming soon on cars, lumber, and chips. And in just over a week, Trump will roll out what he calls his biggest trade policy yet, reciprocal tariffs. But he said on Monday, though, that he may give a lot of countries breaks, signaling that the measure could be more tailored than expected. Meanwhile, President Trump also convened his second cabinet meeting on Monday, touting cost-cutting efforts at different departments. The president stresses it's necessary to cut staff, though acknowledging that some people don't like it.
It's not necessarily a very popular thing to do. You know, you're talking about employment, you're talking about people and the lives of people, and yet I think the American public understands we're trying to save our country and make our country great again.
In other news, on the report that a top editor at The Atlantic magazine was included on a signal message chain in which top Trump officials discussed the recent strikes against the Houthis, the White House press secretary Caroline Leavitt responded in a statement saying President Trump continues to have the utmost confidence in his national security team, including National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. The White House National Security Council says the message chain appears authentic, adding they are reviewing how an inadvertent number was added to it. Reporting from the White House, Iris Tao, NTD News.
The U.S. government has alleged that detained Columbia University student Mahmoud Khalil withheld that he worked for the controversial United Nations Relief and Works Agency in his visa application. The government says that should be grounds for deportation. The UN agency provides food and health care to Palestinian refugees, but Israel contends that 12 of the agency's employees were involved in the October 7th Hamas attack on Israel. The U.S. has since ceased funding of the group. Khalil is a prominent figure in the pro-Palestinian campus protests at Columbia University in New York City. Khalil is a native of Syria and citizen of Algeria. He entered the U.S. on a student visa in 2022 and later filed to become a permanent resident. He is now detained in Louisiana while his case is under litigation. A terrorist in Israel drove his car into a bus stop and then began stabbing and shooting at people. Meanwhile, Israel launched an airstrike that targeted a Hamas leader operating from inside a hospital in the Gaza Strip. NTD's Jason Perry has the update.
Emergency crews in Israel on Monday responded to the scene of another car ramming attack in the country. Police said a terrorist drove his car into an Israeli soldier at a bus stop. The terrorist then stabbed the soldier and took his gun and then began shooting at people driving by, killing an 85-year-old man before police shot and killed the terrorist.
The terrorist, unfortunately an Arab Israeli, came out this morning to kill people, to kill Jews and border police here, and police forces from the region who are deployed and alert, especially during Ramadan.
And in the Gaza Strip, this Al Jazeera reporter was standing in front of the camera when an Israeli airstrike hit Al Nasser Hospital. Israel said they killed the newest leader of the Hamas government, Ismail Barhoum, who was operating from inside the hospital. Israel killed the previous head of the Hamas government just last week. A local resident hoped that hospitals would be off limits in the war.
We plead for protection, at least in the hospital. Forget protection for civilians in the streets, at least in the hospital. Even at hospitals, we cannot have safety.
And the Al Nasser hospital is not all Israeli forces have hit in their latest operations. They recently reported striking more than 100 white pickup trucks in the territory. Israel said Hamas terrorists have used white pickup trucks during the October 7th terrorist attacks, and that those trucks were used for terrorist purposes throughout the Gaza Strip. However, in Israel, people held another rally outside of the home of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and they voiced their concerns about Netanyahu resuming military operations in the Gaza Strip, which some see as abandoning the hostages.
We will not live in a country where people are kidnapped from their beds, from a party next to Gaza and remain there with no plan to bring them home. This is inhumane. We will be in a humane country, in a democracy, and we will never, ever, ever give up.
And later on Monday, sirens sounded in Israel as a missile was reportedly fired from Yemen. Israel said they intercepted a missile over Israeli territory and no injuries were immediately reported. This comes as the United States military reported striking the headquarters of the Houthi terrorist group in Yemen and killing key leaders in the group. Jason Perry, NTD News.
The United States and Russia began talks in Saudi Arabia aimed at a partial ceasefire in the Russia-Ukraine war. The State Department says that a full ceasefire has never been closer. NTD's Jason Blair reports.
There is no military solution to this war. It has to enter negotiation.
The U.S. and Russia started ceasefire talks for the Russia-Ukraine war. The State Department says the U.S. is seeking to broaden the ceasefire to include the Black Sea to, quote, fully restore peaceful commercial activity.
We've never been closer, a breath away from a full ceasefire.
State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce says the prize is a full ceasefire.
We are continuing contact with both Russia and Ukraine. We're committed to continuing our work to bridge that gap. As the Secretary said repeatedly, both sides will have to make compromises as we are working in this ceasefire range. President Zelensky has agreed on a partial ceasefire against energy infrastructure and has reiterated his willingness to adopt a full ceasefire.
Special envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, told Fox News over the weekend that he feels that President Putin wants peace and that he has met with Putin 2 times under the direction of the president.
We had a very, very good conversation, productive. We discussed real ways to end this conflict.
And President Trump said during a cabinet meeting that the U.S. and Ukraine will sign a minerals deal soon.
Europe is giving the money to Ukraine as a loan. We were just pouring money into Ukraine. It was a very unfair situation, so we made a deal on rare earths.
Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
President Trump plans to nominate Dr. Susan Minaret for director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. That's according to a Department of Health and Human Services official. This comes after the White House withdrew the nomination of former Republican Congressman Dave Weldon earlier this month. Weldon said at the time that there weren't enough Senate votes to confirm him. Minaret was previously the deputy director of the Advanced Research Projects Agency for Health. She also held roles at the Department of Homeland Security and the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. Minaret would report to Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. The Atlanta-based CDC has a $9.2 billion core budget. And Trump today named his one-time defense attorney and current White House counselor Alina Habba to be the top federal prosecutor in New Jersey. Habba takes over the interim post from John Giordano. Trump has said he'll name Giordano as the U.S. ambassador for Namibia. Habba spoke to the press today shortly after the announcement. Take a listen.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm sure you've seen President Trump has just put out a statement that he has appointed me as the interim U.S. attorney for the state of New Jersey, my home state. As you know, I've stood by President Trump, his family, the organization, and many other clients in that state where I've been born and raised, and I'm raising my babies now. But there is corruption, there is injustice, and there is a heavy amount of crime right in Cory Booker's backyard and right under Governor Murphy, and that will stop. I look forward to working with Pam Bondi and with the Department of Justice and making sure that we further the president's agenda of putting America first, cleaning up mess, and going after the people that we should be going after, not the people that are falsely accused. That will stop in the great state of New Jersey starting now. Thank you so much.
Who are the people that you want to go after?
We'll see when I get in there. We got to see what's going in. I know you'd love that narrative. Let me be very clear. I didn't actually.
Cory Booker and Governor Murphy.
Correct, because I think Cory Booker and Governor Murphy have failed the state of New Jersey. If you look at what happened in crime, what's going on in Newark, what's going on in Camden, this has been a neglected state. It is one of the most populated states for its size, and it needs to stop. We're going to do a bang-up job. I cannot wait. It's a great honor. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Alina, do you have any more information on this U.S. attorney who died? You know, she died of natural causes.
No, I do not at that time, but I do pray for her family, and I hope she rests in peace. That was tragic.
Why are you leaving the White House then?
I will be leaving the White House soon and going to New Jersey to serve in my current role and my new role. I'm excited.
This isn't ahead of some statewide ambition, political ambition, or is it just...
Thank you all so much. I'm excited. I'll see you in Jersey.
Why did you appoint you permanently?
Coming up, Republican congressional leaders debate on how to codify President Trump's agenda through a reconciliation bill, while Democratic lawmakers continue to call for new leadership. Luis Martinez has what's happening on Capitol Hill. The House will prep a vote today on a bill to curb foreign influence on college campuses. Lawmakers say universities and colleges lack transparency about gifts they receive from foreign actors of concern like Russia and China. Melina Weiskup reports. And wildfires are raging in the Carolinas, triggering a state of emergency and mandatory evacuations. Meanwhile, Palisades fire victims must submit their right of entry form by month's end to allow workers to enter their properties and remove debris. Christina Corona brings us the latest after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Republican congressional leaders debate how to codify President Trump's agenda through a reconciliation bill, while Democratic calls for new leadership persist. Our Washington correspondent, Luis Martinez, has more on what's happening on the Hill.
Got to secure the border. We have to get the economy under control, reduce inflation. We've got to get American energy dominance back and restore peace through strength, reduce the regulatory state. The president's done an heroic job with executive authority right out of the gates, and now we have to codify it. So the reconciliation process is the key to getting that done.
Speaker of the House Mike Johnson is set to meet with Senate Majority Leader John Thune and House and Senate Republican committee chairs on Tuesday to begin the reconciliation of both the House's and Senate's version of the budget resolution. Some Republican lawmakers are already arguing that the spending cuts could be done in a separate legislation.
It is my personal belief we should adhere to the law as it is now, and that is send it back and have Congress confirm it. It's a simple majority vote. It's called rescission.
After a week of contentious town halls in their home district, districts, Democratic lawmakers continue their public calls for new party leadership.
Do a lot better job with the leadership that we had. What I do know is that it was not a good look for the two congressional Democratic leaders to be on opposite sides of the continuing resolution.
The American people are fed up with the old guard. There needs to be a renewal. In Silicon Valley, when a company isn't doing well, you don't keep the same team.
Democratic Senator Bernie Sanders and Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez held rallies in Arizona and Nevada under the slogan, "Fight the Oligarchy."
Today you got three people on top, Musk, Bezos, Zuckerberg, owning more wealth than the bottom half of America, 170 million Americans.
Some Democratic lawmakers have suggested that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez should challenge Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer in 2028, and Senator Bernie Sanders refused to rule out a new presidential run.
I am very proud that the people of the state of Vermont sent me back to the Senate with 63% of the vote. Right now, I'm Vermont Senator. That's what I do, and I'm very happy to do it. I am 83 years of age, and I'm tired.
It's important to know that the Senate Intelligence Committee will hold this Tuesday their worldwide threats hearing, where we expect to hear from the new intelligence chiefs of the Trump administration, namely FBI Director Kash Patel and Tulsi Gabbard, the new Director of National Intelligence. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
From spreading propaganda masked with cultural exchange programs to stealing intellectual property, lawmakers say universities and colleges are getting bribes from countries of concern. To bring the issue to light and stop the flow of cash, House lawmakers will vote on the Deterrent Act. NTD's Alina has the story.
House Republicans are pushing a bill to shine a light on hidden gifts, notably from countries of concern like China.
That the CCP aggressively pushes its propaganda worldwide to try to reshape global narratives in its favor, and it has tried to infiltrate virtually all facets of American society.
Under the Deterrent Act, higher education facilities would have to report all gifts from countries of concern, while the foreign gift reporting threshold for other countries would be lowered from $250,000 down to $50,000. Congresswoman Virginia Foxx is a longtime sponsor of the Deterrent Act, spending years to get this message across.
We know that the Chinese Communist Party is not giving money to these institutions for nothing. They may be trying to get sensitive national security information. They may just be wanting to influence the way students think about the Chinese Communist Party in China.
Confucius Institutes are one example of such a transaction. And while the number of institutes in the U.S. have dwindled from 100 to just 5, other partnerships and contracts pose a threat. The Wall Street Journal reported that between 2012 and 2024, around 200 colleges and universities had around 3,000 contracts with Chinese businesses.
While it's true there could be an academic purpose for a partnership with a country like China or Russia, but these partnerships cannot come at the expense of our national security, research integrity, or future generations.
On Tuesday, a House vote is expected on the Deterrent Act. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Alina, NTD News.
Wildfires that ignited last week are raging across the Carolinas, fueled by high temperatures, strong winds, and dry conditions. And as the deadline approaches in California, over 1,000 Palisades fire victims still need to decide on a debris removal program for their homes. NTD's Christina Corona has the details.
Firefighters are battling wildfires in Polk County, North Carolina, an area still recovering from Hurricane Helene. Evacuation orders were issued on Saturday as 3 major fires have scorched over 4,000 acres. The Black Cove and Deep Woods fire have scorched more than 4,500 acres and remain 0% contained, while the Fishhook fire has burned 190 acres and is 50% contained. 4 homes have been destroyed in Polk County. In South Carolina, Governor Henry McMaster has declared a state of emergency as crews battle the Table Rock and Persimmon Ridge fires. The Table Rock fire has grown to 1,300 acres, and the Persimmon Ridge fire has burned 800 acres. Officials say both states are struggling to contain the fires due to timber downed by Hurricane Helene. In California, homeowners affected by the Palisades fire must file a right of entry form by March 31st to sign up for the free debris removal program. Those who opted out but haven't started removal can still join. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass said over 1,000 residents haven't chosen an option yet. Bass said at a press conference Friday that without action, properties will be considered a nuisance and owners will be liable for abatement costs without FEMA reimbursement, plus a potential lien. On Monday, CAL FIRE announced updated wildfire hazard maps for the state. The new color-coded maps categorize areas into very high, high, and moderate fire hazard severity zones, doubling the amount of land designated for stricter fire regulations. These updated maps come after devastating fires like the Palisades and Eaton fires. The maps indicate that areas with high and very high fire hazard severity totaled 3,626 square miles. According to Cal Matters, this region is home to approximately 3.7 million people. Property owners in high-risk zones will face new regulations to enhance fire prevention measures, such as amber-resistant vents and fire-resistant roofs. Reporting from the city of El Monte, Christina Corona, NTD News.
Coming up, a former Department of Energy official joins us to take a closer look at President Trump's decision to impose tariffs on any country that purchases oil from Venezuela. Could this be a move targeting the Chinese regime? And Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney triggers a snap election. Polls show his Liberal Party closing the gap with the opposing Conservatives. Stay tuned for that after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. President Trump said today that he will impose tariffs of 25% on any nation that purchases oil from Venezuela. Posting on Truth Social, Trump said, quote, Venezuela has been very hostile to the United States and the freedoms which we espouse. He accused the country of, quote, purposefully and deceitfully sending criminals, including violent individuals and members of gangs like Tren de Aragua, to the U.S. Joining us to discuss these latest developments is Bart Marcois, former Department of Energy official during the George W. Bush administration, also a former U.S. diplomat. Bart, thank you so much for joining us. Good to see you again. Now, to begin, how significant of a move is this, especially given that China bought 68% or the vast majority of the oil exported by Venezuela in 2023? That's according to a 2024 analysis by the U.S. Energy Information Administration.
Oh, this is one of the biggest moves any administration has ever made against the foreign adversary, short of actual shooting war. It's enormous. He is saying, not only is he saying we're banning Venezuelan oil and gas, and not only is he saying we're putting tariffs on countries for various trade violations, he's saying we are going to put a 25% tariff on all trade from any country that buys Venezuelan oil and gas. And that's a smack right in the forehead of the Chinese Communist Party, because they're if not the biggest, one of the biggest customers for Venezuelan oil. It's a bold move. It's a strong move, and I'm thrilled to see it.
Now, digging on that China front, several reports note China's history of using front companies to evade U.S. sanctions on Venezuelan oil. What would action from the U.S. government to counter that look like? Like these 25% tariffs, will that be enough to cut through the facade of Chinese front companies?
Oh, yeah. When you're in the oil and gas business, people do front companies all the time to avoid sanctions against sanctioned countries, to buy sanctioned oil. A smart Department of Justice, a smart law enforcement operation, smart Department of Treasury can pierce that corporate veil without a great deal of hindrance. And they know who it is that's buying it, because eventually you track that oil, you track the ship. They go out in the middle of the ocean. If they turn off their transponder, then you know they're exchanging the oil with another ship that also turned off its transponder, and you see where the oil winds up. You can track the flow of oil around the world. You can get away. Bad actors can get away with buying sanctioned oil if nobody really cares about it. But If a government is determined to catch them, it will catch most of them. And it only takes one shipment to trigger the 25% tariff. I think this is a very serious move by the president. And the ball is now in the court of the Chinese Communist Party. Let's see what they do. Do they care about continuing to supply the largest economy in the world, or do they care more about buying cheap oil that is sanctioned by the United States?
Now, the U.S. has extended oil producer Chevron's license in Venezuela after announcing the so-called secondary sanctions. Is there a connection here? Will Chevron be tied to U.S.-Venezuela negotiations that might be triggered by these tariffs?
The United States government is not going to undermine one of the largest contributors to the American economy. It will come up with some mechanism to protect the interests of American companies. I don't expect that they will give Chevron anywhere near as much rope as the Biden administration has done, and I think the days are coming when that license is no longer going to be in operation.
Now, digging into Venezuela, the Miami Herald covered a group of intel experts that say they found direct links between 1,800 members of the TDA or Chen de Aragua and the Venezuelan regime, adding that these were sent to the U.S. with the goal of destabilizing security agency through what's known as asymmetric war. Now, that's a term often associated with the Chinese regime. So any ties here?
Oh, I think the ties between China and Venezuela are quite strong. They're multifaceted. But yes, the Tren de Aragua is a 300 or more of those 1,800 received actual paramilitary training from the Venezuelan military. Were there Chinese advisors there? Possible. Certainly there were Cuban advisors, and the ties there are well known. The strongest ties are between the Venezuelan intelligence network, the military, and the drug cartels, the narco traffickers. There's a drug cartel called the Cartel de los Soles, the cartel of the suns, like the sun in the sky. And they are the people that are above everything else. They're untouchable because they're protected by the Venezuelan government. And I've seen that article you reference, and it names names. It's an extraordinary expose of what the Venezuelans are doing. I saw your broadcast a few minutes before I came on about fires, more wildfires. A lot of the training of these Venezuelan gangs involved arson. And anytime you see arson causing a wildfire or an industrial fire, you can bet that it's better than a 50, 60, 70% chance that a Venezuelan gang or a Mexican cartel was behind the arson.
Very concerning. Now, expanding on that, national security expert Joseph Humayer has said that TDA or Tren de Aragua is a proxy of the Venezuelan regime, which he says is itself a proxy of the Chinese Communist Party. First, do you agree with his assessment here? And if so, explain this relationship.
100%. The Chinese have been protecting the Venezuelans in the world markets and in the world economy, and they will continue to do it. The Venezuelans are a convenient proxy for them, and all of the gangs are a proxy for the Venezuelans. They all work together: China, Venezuela, Cuba, Iran, and Russia. They all work together in one way or another and to one extent or another.
Very concerning indeed. Well, Bart Marcois, as always, thank you so much for joining us.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney visited the nation's Governor General Mary Simon over the weekend to dissolve Parliament. Yesterday's move triggered a nationwide snap election for April 28th. Carney was sworn in as Prime Minister on March 14th after winning the Liberal leadership race. He succeeded his predecessor Justin Trudeau, who resigned earlier this year. After a year and a half of poor poll numbers and election losses last year, Liberals were expected to lose. Now the race is projected to be tight. Since Trudeau announced his resignation, the Liberals have closed a 20-point gap in voters' intentions with the Conservatives. A Nanos poll published on March 20th puts support for the Conservatives at 35% and support for the Liberals at 34%. Coming up in college hoops, we're down to just 16 teams left in March Madness, yet no Cinderellas. NTD's Dave Martin joins us to discuss. And Shen Performing Arts received a heartfelt welcome at their sold-out performance in the State Theater, New Jersey. What audience members had to say after seeing the show, that's coming up. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Gene testing firm 23andMe has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. In a statement announcing the bankruptcy, the board's chair said that determine a court-supervised sale process is the best path forward. The statement added that its CEO had resigned effective immediately. The bankruptcy filing comes after 23andMe struggled for years to find a sustainable business model. Its core product, an at-home DNA testing kit, offered personalized genetic insights. 23andMe tried to convert one-time buyers into subscribers, but reportedly fell far short of its goals. It's not yet known what will happen to all of the genetic data 23andMe currently possesses if a sale is finalized. And last week, the California Attorney General urged California residents to delete their genetic data and destroy genetic samples held by 23andMe upon learning of the company's financial distress. He said it's due to the trove of sensitive consumer data 23andMe has amassed. He said residents can invoke a consumer protection law to have the company comply. And now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, after a whirlwind few days of March Madness, we're down to 16 teams left, and really none are considered Cinderella teams. What happened to them?
Yeah, we kind of missed those this year. There was none of those like 14 or 15 or 16 seeds that pulled off that round one upset over the of those giant teams. We did have some, I'll call them semi-Cinderellas. There was Colorado State was probably the last of them. They lost last night to Maryland on a buzzer beater by freshman Derek Queen of Maryland, banked in the game winner. Probably the best ending we've had to a tournament game so far in this tournament. Now, oddly enough, that's usually something the Cinderella team does the favorite. This time, though, the script was flipped. Really, the only other semi-Cinderella teams that make it to the second round: McNeese State, which was beaten by Purdue, and then you had Drake losing to Texas Tech. Now, neither of those games were really even close, though. So the lowest seeded team left is Arkansas. They are at 10 seed. Obviously, way too big of a school for me to call them a Cinderella, of course. But they pulled off a pretty big upset, beating second seeded St. John's on Saturday. So even though we don't have a Cinderella story going on, I really like what we have left. All four number one seeds are still remaining. You have 3 of the 4 number 2s. Now, only once have all 4 of the number 1 seeds made it to the Final Four. It was a lot of fun that year watching those games. We had great teams playing. Of course, that was the year KU won it all too. But we'll have to see if that actually happens. But there's some very good matchups this week before we actually get to the Final Four.
Well, you actually picked Florida to win it all in your bracket. They did beat UConn yesterday, but it was a very close game. Are you still sticking with Florida?
I've been asked that several times. I am still sticking with them. Obviously, once you submit your bracket, you have to stick with it. Even if that wasn't the case, I'm still sticking. UConn gave them all they could handle yesterday. Florida, really impressively, though, they were patient. They waited for their opportunity. UConn kind of went cold there with about 6 minutes left. Gators made their run, took the lead with maybe 3 minutes left, and they held on to win. Now, if you pick Duke to win, though, I got to say, you got to be sitting pretty right now, because Duke had 2 very big wins over the weekend, and of course they won the ACC obviously without Cooper Flagg. But Cooper Flagg looked great in those 2 wins. He didn't look like he was bothered by that sprained ankle at all. I'm sure it was still bothering him, at least on a pain level anyway. So Duke looked great, Florida not as great, but I am still sticking with the Gators.
Well, looking at NBA news, ESPN is reporting that injured Warriors guard Steph Curry is set to rejoin the team in Miami and might play tomorrow night. Now, with less than a month left in the season, how important are these games?
Yeah, very important, especially for the Warriors. Now, right now, they're in line for the number 6 seed in the Western Conference. That's about as far as you want to go. You do not want to get to the 7 to 10 seeds because then you have that very confusing, I'll say, play-in round where those 4 seeds are vying for 2 spots. But anyway, the Warriors have been playing very well since they got Jimmy Butler about 2 months ago. 16-4 record. Now Tuesday night they're going to play in Miami against the Heat. That's Butler's old team. Now, given the way his tenure kind of ended there a little bit somewhat acrimoniously, I'm not expecting he's going to get a warm welcome in return. But back to Curry, he sustained that bruised pelvic bone Thursday night. Head coach Steve Kerr expects he'll be back sometime on this road trip, so it could be Tuesday night. Stay tuned to find out.
Well, shifting gears to college football, Ohio State head coach Ryan Day confirmed his team will visit the White House next month to celebrate their national title.
Yeah, April 14, 2 days after spring practice wraps up. Now, of course, they beat Notre Dame back in January to win their first title since 2014. Day said it was an honor to be invited. Now, they'll be the second sports team to visit the White House since President Trump moved back in. The Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers visited on February 3rd. Now, meanwhile, the Super Bowl champs, the Philadelphia Eagles, will also visit next month, April 28 to be exact. And Trump also mentioned he's going to have the 2020 Super Bowl winning Kansas City Chiefs team that did not get to visit the White House because of COVID that year. We don't know the exact date yet, though. We do know Trump's obviously a big sports fan, a big football fan. He was at the Super Bowl, of course. So, yeah, big news for the Chiefs. I've never seen a team get invited 5 years later, but apparently that's going to happen.
A lot to look forward to there. Dave, as always, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you.
Shen Performing Arts took the stage to a full house at the State Theater, New Jersey in New Brunswick over the weekend with NTD as a media sponsor. The audience told NTD they were captivated by the dazzling display of ancient China's rich cultural heritage. And the city's public information officer presented Shen with a proclamation on behalf of Mayor James Cahill. Take a look.
It's just an incredible experience. The costumes, the music, the feeling that you get, it's so encapsulating. It's so overwhelming. It's good versus evil, and it's just a reminder of just how much good exists in this world today.
It's awe-inspiring. A lot of it is mirthful. It's very happy, and the portrayal of deities and humanity and their interaction is just really fantastic.
It's the colors are so vibrant. And the graphics are an incredible compliment to the dancers. It just makes me feel so wonderful, so lighthearted.
Since 2006, Shen has toured the world with a mission to revive 5,000 years of divinely inspired traditional Chinese culture and values from before communism. Theatergoers praised the performance for bringing these values and virtues to life and took note of a deeper message.
It's an important message of spirituality and love, and the importance of just being kind. Kindness is the best religion in the world. Let's just be kind to one another. And this message and this show reminds us of the importance of the message of simple kindness.
That's the message that we need today. We need to have so much more, empathy and kindness and just appreciating all the good things that we have.
I'm happy. I'm leaving here a happy person. I'll probably dream of this the rest of my life, of the beauty and the grace.
Shen will be performing at the David H. Koch Theater at Lincoln Center in New York City on Wednesday and will be performing there from March 26th through April 12th. NTD News, New Brunswick, New Jersey.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.